In this session, we will be starting with the mode of action of cytokinins. Basically, two cytokinin receptors are studied extensively. One is ZBP, that is zeatin binding protein, which is a 67 kilodalton, which has got high affinity for zeatin. Another one is CKI1, that is cytokinin independent 1, which is a 125 kilodalton protein, and these both are very prominently studied receptors. Now, once the hormone comes and binds to the receptor, it induces the histidine kinase activity, and resulting to that you can see autophosphorylation of histidine takes place. So, this is the binding action, and continuation to that you can see the signal transduction taking place, where calcium is involved as a secondary messenger. And as you know, calcium interacts with calmodulin, and it is regulated by a protein kinases. And as a result of the secondary signaling, you can see the increase in the mRNA level. So, cytokinin binding happens at the receptor site, and two receptors we already studied, and based on that you can see secondary signaling action taking place, and mainly involved is calcium carbonyl complex. As a result of that, mRNA level goes up. It has been specifically studied in the case of soybean that 20 different mRNA levels are increasing 2 to 20 fold. So, around 20 different mRNAs, the levels of which are going up by 2 to 20 fold within 4 hours of cytokinin application. And these set of mRNAs falls in the group of primary responsive genes, because they are immediately getting activated on cytokinin application. And here you can see in detail how the cytokinin action is taking place. See here, this is on the membrane. The cytokinin comes and bind. The cytokinin binds to a particular receptor protein called CRE1, which is likely to occur as a dimer cytokinin dimer, and cytokinin binds to an extracellular portion. This is the extracellular portion, what you see in red over here, which is called as the chase domain. Two other hybrid sensor kinases are also present below that. One is AHK2 and AHK3, and containing a chase domain are also likely to act as cytokinin receptors in the, this is studied in the case of Arabidopsis. So, cytokinin comes and bind, and here we have a set of receptors, and you can see that either it can be CRE1, HK2 and HK3. And on binding of cytokinin, histidine kinase domain gets phosphorylated. And how phosphorylation takes place? It is through the phosphate group donation from ATP. So, cytokinin binding to these receptors activates their histidine kinase activities. So, below you have the histidine kinase. So, histidine kinase activity is getting activated. The phosphate is transferred to an aspartate residue. It is getting transferred to an aspartate residue on the fused receiver domains. Now, these are the first two steps: cytokinin binding, phosphorylation of the histidine kinase. The third step is the phosphate is then transferred to a conserved histidine present in the AHP protein. That is, the phosphate is getting transferred from here to the conserved histidine present in the AHP protein. Now, in the fourth step, the AHP protein, phosphorylation causes the AHP protein to move into the nucleus through the nuclear pore. It moves into the nucleus, and where it transfers the phosphate to an aspartate residue located within the receiver domain of type B ARR. So, this is the type B ARR, and the phosphate group from here is transferred. Okay. From AHP, the phosphate is transferred, And once type B ARR is phosphorylated, you can see the fifth steps take place, that is the phosphorylation of the type B ARR activates the output domain to induce transcription of genes encoding type A ARRs. So here the mRNA synthesis takes place. This may be again for the production of type A ARR. Now the seventh step, the sixth step is the type A ARR are likely also to be phosphorylated by the AHP protein. So either the type A ARR can directly get phosphorylated from the AHP, or it can go in this particular direction and fresh synthesis of type A ARR takes place. And coming to the last stage, the phosphorylated type ARRs interact with various effectors, either phytochrome B or other effectors, and as a result of that you can see cell function mediated changes takes place in the cell function appropriate to cytokinin. So cytokinin responses are being shown over here. So this is a bit complicated steps which is getting along. That is the cytokinin. Again I can repeat once again. The cytokinin binds, the chase domain of it is basically involved in the reception of the cytokinin. Based on that, the phosphorylation takes place in the histidine kinase domain, and it is further transferred into the receiver domain. From there, the phosphorylation, the phosphate group is transferred to AHP. AHP moves inside the nucleus. The phosphate group is transferred to type B ARR, as a result of which the activation of the DNA takes place, mRNA synthesis takes place, again which will culminate in the synthesis of type A ARR. This type A ARR is responsible for the activation of the intermediate various effectors. The effectors they have put as question marks because some of the effectors are still to be identified, but one of the suspected effector is phytochrome B, and as a result of these effectors cytokinin responses are being seen. So this is how the cytokinin action is taking place on application to the plant tissue. Now we move into the third hormone, that is the gibberellins. Gibberellins is discovered as a Japan foolish seedling or Bakane disease. Gibberellin is basically, the name itself is derived from a fungus called as Gibberella fujicorae. It's a fungus, and based on the infection of this fungus on the plants, the certain seedlings were found to be elongated abnormally, and that is why it is being referred to as foolish seedling or Bakane disease. In 1913, impure crystals of fungal growth was crystallized, and they found that the active compound is gibberellin A and B, and all gibberellin they have basically an enantiomer cowrene ring structure. This is the structure what you see over here. This is a enantiomer cowrene ring structure. So you examine any gibberellin, you can see that basically it will be having this chemical structure. In 1958, J. Macmillan, they identified gibberellin A1 from a higher plant, from the seeds of Phaseolus, and the seeds are supposed to be the best source of gibberellins. And now you know there are a series of gibberellins being discovered, and we have the numbering GA1, 2, 3, etc., etc. And the numbering of GA is based on the discovery of the gibberellin. The first discovered will bear the number GA1, the second discovered will have GA2. The numbering doesn't have any significance on the relationship between its chemical structure, but only based on the sequence of its discovery it is given the numbering. So GA1, GA2, GA3, etc., etc. And I told you the cowrene structure or the gibberellin structure, basic structure is this what you see over here. All gibberellins are based on enantiomer gibberellin structure, and if you examine, there are either 20 carbon and in some cases it may have 19 carbon. So, in total either it may have 20 carbon or 19 carbon, and all are remaining in ring structure. How does the biosynthesis of this hormone takes place? There are two pathways. One is mevalonic acid dependent pathway. Here the precursor will be mevalonic acid and takes place in cytosol. So, it starts from a mevalonic acid, and another one is mevalonic acid independent pathway. Here the precursor is not mevalonic acid, but it is glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate and pyruvate, and this is happening in chloroplast. So, the first mevalonic acid pathway is happening in cytosol, and second is happening in the chloroplast. And gibberellic acid or gibberellins are made up of basically 4 isoprene units. Isoprene units means each isoprene unit will have 5 carbon, and these isoprene units are present in many of the plant products. Even you can see that rubber is made up of isoprene units. So, basically the 5 carbon structure, that is the basic structure of gibberellin and gibberellic acid, and each will have 5 carbon, and each of these isoprene units are added successively one after the other. So, you can see that over here when 2 isoprene units are combined together, the first you get the formation of geranyl pyrophosphate. So, this is C10, that means 2 isoprene units, carbon 5 is joined together. And when another isoprene joined together with that, you get the formation of farnesyl pyrophosphate, that is carbon 15. And again when another isoprene unit joined together with that, you get the formation of geranyl pyrophosphate. So, again I will explain, 2 isoprene units joined together for the formation of geranyl pyrophosphate. One more isoprene unit joining, that means farnesyl pyrophosphate, C15, carbon 15. One more isoprene unit joining, it becomes geranyl pyrophosphate. And you can see the geranyl pyrophosphate, the cyclization reaction takes place. So, this will be a long chain of 20 carbons. It cannot remain as a long chain because already you have seen the structure is a cyclic structure. So, cyclization has to take place. So, 2 enzymes are localized in the proplastids of meristematic shoots for this particular function. So, the GGP, that is geranyl pyrophosphate carbon 20 structure gets cyclized and enantiomer covering structure is formed. And if you apply some inhibitors like AMO 1618, Cycocel and phosphon D, this particular step can be inhibited and no cyclization will take place at this stage, and as a result of that no gibberellic acid synthesis will take place. But otherwise if inhibitor is not present, the cyclization will take place. After cyclization, next is the stage 2. What happens in stage 2? A methyl group is oxidized to carboxylic group. The methyl group is oxidized to carboxylic group. Also one of the ring, that is the B ring, contracts from a 6 carbon to 5 carbon. So, here you can see one of the ring, it contracts from 6 carbon to 5 carbon. So, that is happening in the stage 2. A methyl group is oxidized to carboxylic group, that is the first change. Also one of the ring, that is the B ring, second ring, contracts from 6 carbon to 5 carbon. And the enzymes for these particular changes are localized in the endoplasmic reticulum. And there is an inhibitor which we can apply at this stage, that is called as peclobutrazole. On application of this enzyme inhibitor, it can cut the or inhibit the this particular stage or the reactions of this stage, and accordingly the gibberellin synthesis can be prevented. The third stage, all enzymes, all steps catalyzed by enzyme dioxygenase is located in the cytosol. Here basically two chemical changes are taking place. One is hydroxylation at C13 or C3 or both. That is one of the major change, that is hydroxylation taking place at C13, carbon 13 or carbon 3. Either it can take place independently or together it can take place. Also a successive oxidation at C20 happens, followed by a carbon loss of C20. So that is the second reaction, that is a successive oxidation at C20, that is carbon 20, followed by a carbon loss at carbon 20. So this is happening at stage 3. Again I can repeat, the stage 1 is cyclization reaction. The long carbon 20 chain gets cyclized into different rings, and second stage is the major two changes are taking place. In the B ring or the second ring, the one of the carbon is lost, and from 6 carbon it converts into 5 carbon. And coming to the third stage, there are two reactions taking place, that is hydroxylation at C13 or C3 or both together, and also a successive oxidation at C20 and a carbon loss at C20. And once these three stages are complete, you get the active gibberellin. We have already seen bioassays in the case of cytokinin. Similarly, we have bioassays in the case of gibberellins also. And here 3 bioassays are referred in the textbooks. One is lettuce hypocotyl elongation bioassay. Second is Dorr-Fries leaf sheath bioassay. Third is barley aileron layer alpha amylase bioassay. So again I am repeating, bioassays are nothing but these are the assays being carried out in a biological material on the action of the plant growth hormones. It can be the action of already present hormone within the tissue, or it can be the action of the externally supplied hormones. In both cases, either in vivo hormone or in vitro hormone, in both cases it can bring about a significant changes in the biological material, and the action of the hormone can be studied, and that is what being referred to as bioassays. Here basically 3 bioassays are being referred, and we will be seeing in detail about the third one, that is barley aileron layer alpha amylase bioassay. Here as you see, this is the germinating seed. Here when the seed germinates, the coleoptile emerges out, and accordingly you can see that there are certain changes taking place in the seed. Gibberellins are synthesized by the embryo. Normally gibberellins are synthesized, and how it is synthesized we have already seen the 3 different stages. The synthesis takes place in the embryo over here and released into the starchy endosperm. See, after the synthesis, the gibberellins move into the endosperm via the scutellum. So this is the scutellum portion. What you see over here is the scutellum portion. So gibberellin synthesized in the embryo moves through the scutellum and reaches the endosperm. Second, gibberellins diffuse to the aileron layer. This is the aileron layer. So GAs move from the endosperm to the aileron layer. Third, aileron layer cells are induced to synthesize and secrete alpha amylase in the aileron. This blue region, that is the aileron layer. There alpha amylase synthesized, and also other hydrolases which are necessary for the breakdown of the stored food materials are being synthesized in the aileron layer, and it is being released into the endosperm. Starch and other macromolecules are broken down to small molecules. So after the synthesis of alpha amylase and hydrolases in the aileron layer, they are released into the endosperm over here, and whatever stored food materials in the endosperm are broken down by the action of the enzyme what is being synthesized in the aileron layer. I again repeat, the gibberellins are synthesized in the embryo. They are transferred into the endosperm of the seed via scutellum. On reaching the endosperm, they move to the aleurone layer, where alpha amylase and hydrolase synthesis takes place by the action of the GA, and the synthesized alpha amylase and hydrolases move into the endosperm, and there starch and other macromolecules are broken down for the utilization of the growing embryo. So, this is the action of gibberellins what is being synthesized in the embryo. And already we have seen in the case of earlier hormones, cytokinins and auxins, the transported form are always in bound form or intermediate form, and only the active form comes up in the site of action. Here also you can see gibberellin intermediates are being transported, and they are not in the free form, they are in intermediate form, they are generally transported. High in developing seeds and decreases in mature seeds. So, the intermediate forms are generally high in developing seeds, but once they are maturing, the level of intermediates decreases. Initial steps of GA biosynthesis may occur in one tissue and metabolism to active gibberellins in another. So, initial steps of GA synthesis may occur in one tissue and they are transported to the site of their action, and the active forms of gibberellins occur in other tissues. Intermediates of gibberellins are transported from meristematic shoot tissues to the green leaves. So, generally they are synthesized in the meristematic shoot tissues and they are being transported into the green leaves for the action. And GA biosynthesis can be regulated. The synthesis of gibberellins can be regulated by 4 different levels. One is photoperiod. Photoperiod is the necessity of ample amount of light. For example, LDP, that is long day plants. When we transfer the long day plants from short day to long day, we can see there is alteration in the GA metabolism or the level of gibberellic acid synthesis. That means the photoperiod or the amount of light falling has an influence in the biosynthesis of gibberellins. Another important regulatory factor is temperature, that is the vernalization phenomena is being controlled by flowering phenomena is controlled by gibberellin, and again gibberellin level can be controlled by temperature. So, the temperature level when it is conducive or when it is favoring, the GA synthesis takes place, and because of that flowering takes place. Another mechanism controlling the GA synthesis is feedback control. When more of GA is synthesized, the same GA will come and inhibit the biosynthetic pathway, that is the feedback control. Fourth is by conjugation with sugars. When GA is not required in its active form, it is conjugated with certain sugars and we call it as GA glycosides. And GA glycosides will not be active, and only when glycosides or the sugars are removed, the GA will become active again. So, these are the 4 different regulatory means of GA biosynthesis. There are different effects of GA are discussed with regarding to growth and development. You can see that GA can stimulate stem growth in dwarf and rosette plants. That is dwarf means very small plants. If you apply GA, you can see that the stem growth can be regulated. Also you can see that regulation of transition from juvenile to adult phase, that can be regulated. Transition from the juvenile phase to the adult phase. Influence of floral initiation and sex determination, that is another important effect of GA. If you apply GA, the floral initiation takes place, and even the sex determination, the formation of male and female flowers can be influenced by the application of GA. It can promote fruit set. Example is in the case of apple. If you apply more fruit setting will take place. So, this is beneficial in the application of for the application in the case of orchards, apple orchards. You apply more of GA and more fruit set and more productivity will be obtained. It can promote seed germination. If seed germination is very less, the application of GA can enhance the level of seed germination. Also, there are very important commercial applications for GA. If you want to increase the fruit production, increase the stalk length of grapes, citrus, it can delay the senescence. Also, if you want to malt the barley, why malting has to be done? If you want to get, if you want to bring about the malting of barley, and that is basically a commercial application for beer production, beverage production. Third, it can increase the sugarcane yield. How it can increase the sugarcane yield? If you can get more elongation of the stem by GA application, you can have big sugar canes, and more sugar canes means more productivity can be obtained from that. And in plant breeding, it is applied for inducing cones in conifers. If you want to produce more cones in conifers, you can apply GA. And another application is that GA synthesis inhibitors are generally applied in floral crops. If you want to get more flower production, or if you want to reduce the flower production, either you can apply GA or you can apply inhibitors based on your requirement. So these are various commercial applications of GA. And now we come to the one of the last topic of GA action. This topic is topic of gibberellins is the mechanism of GA action. Already I told you it can promote stem growth. And how it is promoting stem growth? It is basically increasing the cell wall extensibility. Also, you have seen in the case of cytokinin, it can bring about cell wall extensibility. It has been seen that the application of GA can increase the action of xyloglucan endotransglycosylase. That is, in short, we call it as XET, X-E-T, xyloglucan endotransglycosylase. So also it can facilitate the penetration of expansins into the cell wall. So basically the cell wall extensibility is brought about by the activity increase of XET, that is xyloglucan endotransglycosylase, or it can also simultaneously facilitate the penetration of expansins into the cell wall. Also it can mobilize the endosperm reserves, You can see how that is taking place over here. I can explain to you directly from this figure. The GA comes and bind to the GA receptor, and on binding of GA receptor, you can see the heteromeric G proteins are getting activated, and it is the secondary signaling intermediates, the G proteins. The activation of G proteins will culminate in calcium dependent signal transduction pathway involving cardmodulin and protein kinase. And you can see that the activation of alpha amylase, fresh synthesis of alpha amylase takes place. And also you can see that activated GA signaling intermediates can move inside the nucleus, and it will bind to a repressor called as DELA repressor, which is repressing the action of fresh synthesis of alpha amylase. Once the DELA it comes and bind to the repressor, that is the activated GA signaling intermediate, the repressor is removed. The red one what is shown is the repressor. The repressor is removed, and based on the removal of the repressor, the mRNA synthesis takes place, and mRNA synthesis occurs, and as you see from here, based on that the transcription factors are synthesized. These transcription factors will give rise to the synthesis of alpha amylase mRNA, and alpha amylase mRNA will result in the fresh synthesis of alpha amylase, and alpha amylase synthesized and delivered outside, and which will help in the starch degradation. So, all this starts with the action of the GA. Again I repeat, GA will come and bind to the receptor. The receptor binding will result in the activation of G proteins. G proteins will activate the signaling intermediates. The signaling intermediates move inside the nucleus and bind to the delta repressor. Delta repressor on binding gets removed. As a result of that, mRNA activation or mRNA synthesis occurs. mRNA synthesis will result in the production of transcription factors. The transcribed transcription factors formed will come and bind to the binding site. As a result of that, alpha amylase mRNA is synthesized and alpha amylase production starts, and alpha amylase is delivered, and alpha amylase will result in the starch degradation in the endosperm, and as a result of which you can see the starch is degraded into simpler forms, and that starch is being utilized by the embryo for the germination purpose. Now we have concluded the portion related to gibberellins, and now we will move into the next important hormone, that is ethylene, that we will be seeing in the next session.